Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we kick off our King Kong retrospective with Kong, Skull Island, still in theaters. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Henceforth known as the eighth wonder of the world.
The eighth, and only the eighth wonder of the world. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hola. Okay, according to Wikipedia, Kong Skull Island, and a lot of you guys may not have seen this movie, so seriously, we are going to spoil this movie. According to Wikipedia, Kong Skull Island is a 2017 American monster picture directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts. It is a reboot of the King Kong franchise, and it serves as the second movie in the new legendary Monsterverse. It has an ensemble cast, just a couple of them. You're laughing already. What are you laughing at?
Monsterverse, I'm sorry. I
Wasn't
shouldn't.
Monsterverse the name of that long-running show that Joe Bob Briggs hosted on TNT?
That
back
was
in the day?
Monster Vision.
But this movie, this is the Monsterverse, and King Kong is in it, and Godzilla's in it. I mean, he's not in it. Godzilla's not in this one, but he's in the Monsterverse. This film includes a giant ensemble cast. Just a few of them are Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson, and John C. Reilly. Not even mentioning John Goodman.
John Goodman.
The film follows a team of scientists and Vietnam War soldiers who travel to an uncharted island in the Pacific and encounter terrifying creatures and the almighty Kong. All right, let's get our opening thoughts. It is going to be so fun to talk about this movie. With us is a writer that I associate with a love of all things simian. Tony, can you kick us off with opening thoughts on Kong Skull Island?
Okay. This movie is tons of fun. I've seen people griping about, oh, it's CG this, and as a person who is familiar with CG, I will say there was some parts that took me out of it a little bit, but man, is this movie fun. I also immediately wanted just to own every Weird War comic ever, so I could just go back and binge them all weekend after this movie. I really dig it. I think it was great. There's lots of comedy. I will preface this by saying at Banamathon this year in December, the director came and said, he showed two clips. The beginning, which really was like Weird War, and then the reveal of Kong, and later in the 70s. And man, I was on the fence until I saw that and was like, oh, I can't wait for this movie. And even his reaction when they said, hey, we're going to reboot Kong, he was like, why?
Right.
Like, what are you going to, what's going to be different? Are you going to do it better than Peter Jackson? I thought that was a cool take. I thought it was cool of him to say, why should we do this? Have you asked yourself this? And actually stand up to the studio and ask these kinds of questions. That's pretty cool to me. I was super stoked and I had a blast.
Julia.
I agreed with Tony, but I actually even go further to say that I thought the CGI was great. I didn't just not think it was hokey. I thought it was really good. I never once was watching it going, that just looked really stupid. There was a plenty of times when I went, that line was really stupid, but there wasn't a single time when I went, that looks really fake or that looks really dumb. I loved it. I thought it was a very convincing ape. I thought the monsters were convincing. God, there's this giant spider that is the best. I just loved it so much because it took me, at least, I don't know about everybody else, it took me a long time to even understand what I was looking at because the legs look like the trees and you're just like, what? Why are the trees suddenly moving? Is somebody using them as spears? What's going on? And then I'm looking at it going, oh, it's a spider. That is wicked cool. So yes, I really loved that. I love the cast. Yes, the plot, the screenplay is not going to win any Oscars, but that's okay. It's not intended to. It's a really fun film. Really beautiful.
Very cool. Drew, I mean, is anybody going to actually not like this film, or did we all just love the film? Go ahead, Drew.
The original King Kong is one of my favorite movies, and I was discussing this movie on Facebook earlier with somebody who was saying, "Oh, it's a shame that they're doing it this way because you have to keep true to the roots of Kong as he has to be taken off the island and be this tragic figure." And I thank Kong Almighty that they did not do the same story that we have seen 3 times already. And look, I love the original movie. I was watching it again when preparing for this podcast, but I really, really, really loved this version. And Tony was talking about weird war comics. There was a series in particular that DC put out called The War That Time Forgot.
Okay.
And this movie is very much cut from that particular cloth. So, I really feel like not only did I get a really good King Kong movie, I got a War That Time Forgot movie, which is something that we probably never will get. So, I really, really, really enjoyed this movie. It's outside of having all the bits of Kong that you want, it delivers also aspects of Aliens and, of course, all the Vietnam War movies. And it actually ends up being a better 70s Kong than the actual 70s Kong, which I think is kind of amazing.
And we're definitely going to do the 70s Kong on this retrospective, so it'll be fun to go after that. Wow. Okay, fabulous. So the only thing I'll add to that, because I also really loved it, but the only thing I'll add to that is that I was so thrilled by the time period of this movie, not just because I'm a geek about the 70s, but because a couple things. One, I love when movies pick a specific time that they're going to put the movie in and commit to that. So instead of it just sort of being a generic always now or always just slightly a few years in the future, this one picked, it's towards the end of the Vietnam War, and and so that means this is what cameras look like, and this is what watches look like, and all that stuff. And that was really neat. That was really cool. And it runs counter to that logic that we've heard for years about how, you want to kind of genericize them and make them always recognizable for today.
I think it's so much fun when they put movies in a different era these days. That's what made Mad Men so much fun. And this one, I just was looking at the slide projector going, oh, I just felt like such a deep nostalgia because
Sure.
my dad, as a photographer, we lived with our slide projector every weekend, and I was just like, oh, the slide projector. It just made me so happy. So many things made me so happy and nostalgic.
Well, also bear in mind that this other thing has happened where I have now lived long enough that the Vietnam War has reached the level of misty nostalgia that when in my youth was occupied by World War II. Because when I was in high school, World War II was only 40 years ago. And now we're there with Vietnam. In other words, kids in high school today are as distant from the Vietnam War as in high school I was from the end of World War II. And so that means that these soldiers in Vietnam in these movies are occupying the same sort of ethereal legendness as
Every
World
time you
War
say
II
these
soldiers.
things, Jason, I get mad at you.
What about age? Age is the
Yeah,
least
I'm
of
like-
of
I'm
the.
no, there's no way. I'm doing the math. Oh crap, he's right.
Yeah, sure.
Drew and I kind of had a sort of discussion about that before the film. But
about the
about
the
age.
distance of World War II.
Not exactly. Just about age. and
Aging.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, yeah, aging's part of it. And look, nobody likes to age. I don't enjoy that stuff. But I am fascinated by how there's a language that develops about things in the past as they reach a certain distance. They pick up a certain speed as they retreat towards the horizon. And, the Vietnam War has now entered that horizon and is going faster and becoming myth, which is fascinating to me. And it means that I've lived long enough to see my youth become myth. So, Having said that, there are some inaccuracies actually about the way they present the Vietnam War. This is supposedly, I think they said like 1973, and they're bugging out as though it's Saigon, which is 1975. I don't understand why that is happening. I don't exactly get, but whatever. That doesn't matter.
I don't think they said 73. I thought they said 72.
73.
I don't know what year did they leave Vietnam?
1975.
No,
Saigon's
Vietnam,
not abandoned
Saigon.
until 1975. So I don't know
Well,
what.
no, this is taking place right as they're pulling out of Vietnam. I mean, that is a big
Right.
plot point in this movie. That's the
But
whole
that's-
reason why Samuel L. Jackson goes so far off the rails.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just saying that that's wrong because the abandonment of the helicopter is picking our guys up off the roofs and all that stuff. That happened in 1975. It doesn't matter. I think this is just I have no explanation for that. I'm just saying that that's a thing that I'm mystified by. So anyway, and I will, and I feel so certain about this, I'll go back and research it later, and if I turn out to be proven wrong, I will insert a thing saying Jason is wrong in the following 5 minutes. So here we go. Okay. Which will be so weird because I'll suddenly be cutting into my own show and warning the audience.
You can just post about it on the Facebook. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
No,
Okay.
no,
So, all right.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about the specific time and place, and in fact, I do want to get to like quotations from other movies, but I think we should talk straight up at the top about the character of Kong. I think that I want to talk about Kong, and then I want to talk about this thing that is called the Monsterverse. So first of all, Drew, I know that you were a big proponent of the original Kong, right? So
Yeah.
is this design at all similar to Kongs that we've gone before? What are we looking for if we're going into this movie?
I would say it's actually a lot closer to the 30s Kong than the Peter Jackson Kong. He's upright. He's much more humanoid. He's got the Toho Kong's size.
Yeah.
So he's kind of a fusion of those two versions, I would say. In terms of his personality, I think he's definitely still, he's a lot closer to me to the 30s Kong than the Peter Jackson Kong, and in terms of his personality as well, because he's much more of a monster. Again, even though, we learn that he has like this purpose within the ecosystem of the island, which ultimately is kind of benevolent, it's implied that he eats some of the soldiers, and he really goes to thick cow on them when they come in. I mean, like, he beats the crap out of these guys that are likable. Like, they make the soldiers very likable in this movie, and then Kong just terrorizes them. So personally, I do like the Peter Jackson film a lot, but I really like the fact that they did not hold back on him being a monster.
To the extent that he is a monster, I think it's because he's on a different scale. So that these are, they may be likable, but they're like bees almost to him, or lizards or something,
That is something the director said. He was like, I wanted to make, he said in the original, in the 70s, they talk about like Kong is a god. He's like, not only did, it has to fit the Monsterverse, so he has to fight Godzilla. He's like, that's not the big thing. That wasn't the big thing for me. He's like, he has to be revered as a god. He has to be that just massive. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And this guy is big, and because of where the camera hangs a lot of the times when it's dealing with Kong, you kind of experience the island from his perspective, so that like when you're up around Kong's shoulders and so forth, where he has an island that is a weird landscape, and he doesn't know any different, but this is a strange landscape where the mountains come up to about his shoulders, and he just sort of wanders around and does whatever it is one does when he's hanging out on his island, and all these humans just sort of do their thing. And this is also the second movie correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Peter Jackson one also try to establish that there were a bunch of previous King Kongs, and that this one is the latest and maybe
they
last?
had the bones of the other members of his species in the Jackson version, and they have brought that into that. But I think that was necessary in this, because this one, unlike all the other versions, which is what I said in my opening thoughts, is they never get off of the island, so they get that tragic dimension.
Yeah.
They made him the last of his kind, and they implied that in the Peter Jackson version. It's really a big talking point in this.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I thought that was something that was just sort of not lifted, but that was inspired, I think, by the Peter Jackson version. I lose track because I'm not a reliable math guy, but I know that Kong's height has changed considerably over time. I mean, like the original 1930s Kong was small enough that he had to climb the Empire State Building. He was only like 3 stories tall, I suppose, and so he had to climb up that building and could stand on it. But King Kong versus Godzilla Kong would have towered over the Empire State Building. I mean, and he's something like, I don't even know. I think he's like 600 feet tall or something like that. How tall is this Kong here? It's hard to tell because he's in among mountains on an island. Basically, there are no buildings to mess us up.
Right. Yeah. There's a number somewhere, but I can't remember.
I believe that they said that he was 100 feet in this. I remember reading that.
100 feet.
And I mean, who knows? I mean,
100 feet is not even that tall. That's what's interesting.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a character that doesn't actually exist. He exists in pixels, and so I never think about that. I think that that's something. There's types of fans. There's different types of fans. There are types of fans who love the charts and graph stuff, and I see this a lot, particularly with super fans of giant monster stuff. Like they really love all the charts and graphs about how big they are. And then there's the other kinds.
You mean comparing them, like showing here's the Empire State Building, here's the Statue of Liberty.
This version is this, and this version is that. I never do that. I just accept the fact that this is a giant gorilla. And he's bigger than everything else, and that's the important thing. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to do it the other way, but I just think there's 2 ways you can think about it.
Yeah. Well, and as Tony's pointed out occasionally, there are some questions that ultimately they might be interesting to pose, but they're not actually that interesting to answer. It's like ultimately, who cares? We're going back to that problem of concretizing the myth, right? You're screwing around with things that are not meant to be thought about. He's big. He's a giant gorilla. He can hold you in his palm. That's all we need to know. Gosh, it was so cool to see this movie not bother with King Kong stuff. I used to be so much a purist. I would have been one of those people who's like, oh, if you're going to do Kong, it has to be the real story where, they're going to go out, they're going to take pictures, they're going to put him on a big raft, 8th wonder of the world, blah, blah, blah. And I like the fact that they're not doing any of that. Drew, it's like you said, it's totally different story.
They do have their nods. They have a wall. There's a scene where he puts Brie Larson in his hand. There's enough of that stuff in there that if you want it, obviously he's to me, my favorite parts of the original Kong and the Peter Jackson Kong are the stuff on the island. I never am as interested in the New York City Rampage stuff. So to me, having a movie that's spent all on Skull Island that's just cake to me. I guess banana cream pie would be a better analogy. But I love the fact that they never get off the island. This is a Kong movie where they just don't mess with that. And my favorite parts of the original Kong and the Peter Jackson Kong is the stuff on the island. I'm not that interested in the New York City stuff.
Yeah, I love the natives. I mean, again, with the spoilers, there are people on the island who have always lived there.
Well, if you've seen any other Kongs, you already know that. But these are different, and they're interesting.
Well, I just mean, but I don't know, because I don't know who's watched which movies, and I haven't really watched very many of them. But anyway, so I loved them. I think they were really beautiful. I mean, I don't know how politically correct it all is because I don't know what natives on.
I would say it's a
Desert
lot
Island
more
would be.
politically correct than the previous version.
Yeah, probably.
Absolutely.
But they sure
This
are
this
beautiful.
movie
I would agree
handles
with there.
yeah. I mean, consider the way that the natives, and this has always been. Look, the whole Kong thing has a big racial perspective that is difficult to figure out a way to comment on. But like the natives in a lot of these movies are very strange and usually presented from a kind of a white man's burden perspective. Like, um, no civilized person has observed these rituals for hundreds of years, the guy will say, which is a line that people used to, and that even Indiana Jones hauls out at one point, and usually it was a lot of actors like in blackface doing a lot of imaginary native dances and stuff like that. Um, I don't know how, like even in the Japanese one, you had the kind of imaginary natives, not distinctly non-Japanese styled natives doing their big King Kong worship dance.
Yeah, the natives here, they, first of all, because they specifically set this they put Skull Island in Asia.
Yeah.
They're Asian, and
Yeah.
they seem to have like a fully formed culture, and it's not a lot of that old Hollywood jungle movie
Yeah.
stereotypes, and that's probably refreshing to a lot of people.
I thought it was interesting they even linked them, possibly even when the guy's talking about all the Hollow Earth stuff. So even back to like, could they be somehow linked to that? Could they be linked to Tibet? Could they, what I mean? Like all of that stuff could go together easily, especially with their like makeup and tattoos and everything.
The makeup was fascinating. The fact that the motif of these natives are these like raised yellow. It's makeup, but it's also raised on their face, so their face is adorned with these sort of yellow block hieroglyphics that are that element that's everywhere.
Yeah,
It was
it's camouflage for the walls they have.
right. That's true.
Which
It
also
was.
it also mirrors the birds that are there.
Yeah. So that was a lot of thought has gone into these guys, and I have to say I liked them a lot better than the natives in the Peter Jackson King Kong. My main problem with the natives there, and I'll keep this to like just a few seconds because we're probably going to do that movie, is I felt like the native section in Peter Jackson was like gratuitously violent and grisly, and made me feel like all of a sudden like I wasn't watching an in control movie, and maybe I think Jackson would go, well, that's the point. You're supposed to feel scared, but I really felt like it was just kind of beyond what was necessary to do the King Kong story. But maybe people will disagree with me about that. I'm thinking specifically about the braining of people in that section. But
Well,
here,
I like how they're presented.
yeah,
I like how they come out, like even from because I don't know if you mentioned at the beginning how it opens, how the film opens, but you have
oh yeah,
what will eventually end up being John C. Reilly. Is that his name? John C. Reilly?
yes,
Yeah, John C. Reilly's character being parachuting onto the island from his now crashing helicopter, and he is also being pursued by, or rather fighting with, a Vietnamese guy who's also parachuting.
Well, no, you're fighting in World War
It's
II.
World War II.
You're fighting a
So
Japanese.
Right. Oh yeah, you're right. No, it's a Japanese guy, right? So anyway, so they're so they probably have shot each other's helicopters down, I'm guessing. So they're both parachuting down, and now they're going to fight. And the Japanese guy is awesome with a sword, and John is not that good with a gun.
Yeah.
So they end up just kind of chasing each other around as they're fighting. Suddenly they look up at when John C. Reilly's about to get killed, and there's King Kong. Anyway, so then cut to Vietnam era, and these guys are out there, and suddenly they become aware of the fact that they're completely surrounded by these previously invisible natives who, as I said, have been camouflaged into the wall. And so they all come at them with spears. And John C. Reilly comes out and is like, whoa, no, we're good. Everybody chill out. Everybody calm down. And you realize that, there's this American hanging out on the island that's befriended these natives. It's pretty cool.
And then he's been there for nearly 30 years. So we should talk about John C. Reilly. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
So one thing I liked, and this can't be coincidence, but I thought it was funny. His jacket says "good for health," so it's a nod. It seems like a nod to Steve Brule, like, for your health. But it's also a nod to Akira, where Canada's jacket says "good for health, bad for education" on the back.
That's really interesting. I did not know that.
Also, the Japanese guy Gunpei Ikari, I think I could be totally wrong. Akari Warriors, which is a great video game, and Gunpei. But I think there's a couple Gunpeis in the video game industry proper, and I was just, that stuff made me happy. Again, I don't think hope I'm not reading too much into it, but just the nods to little bits I thought were pretty great.
You're definitely not reading too much into the jacket, because that's, now that you point that out, obviously that's not an accident. I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know to do that, but it's definitely not an accident. So that is pretty awesome.
Which I thought was double clever. Pretty cool. Yeah. I love his character too. Like, he steals the show.
He's wonderful. This character of somebody who's been on a Pacific island since World War II, that's a concept that's been kicking around since the 60s. And in fact, it was fascinating to people in the 60s. I think as we've gotten farther from World War II, you don't tell this joke anymore, because obviously whoever that would have been would kind of be long dead. But in the 60s and 70s, it was still completely conceivable that somebody could be kicking around a Pacific island and not aware whether the war had ended or anything like that.
They found Japanese soldiers that definitely did that.
Yeah, exactly. And in this case, they've just made the character an American character. There was a Japanese person. We haven't learned the story of precisely how he died, but he definitely died.
No, they do.
Oh, yeah, they do.
He was killed by one of the big lizard things.
Yeah.
Oh, did they?
The skull crawlers, which he named them that because it sounded cool.
Oh, I apologize. I know that he ended up definitely becoming John C. Reilly's comrade at arms. We know that happened.
Yeah.
But I didn't remember. Okay, so the skull crawlers got him. Yeah. John C. Reilly is played. Here's the interesting thing. He's played for laughs. He has the funniest lines, and yet to me, he's also one of the most human characters in the whole story. And I don't know if it's because he's allowed to be a lot funnier than everybody else, but he seems to be inhabiting a three-dimensional person more than, say, Tom Hiddleston, who plays a retired special forces dude from Britain.
I have to say, Tom Hiddleston's looking fine in this movie, mighty fine, because we're so used to seeing him as Loki, where he's kind of almost strung out a little bit. He's like super skinny and goth or whatever, or emo or something.
Well, and we just watched him last week in The Only Lovers Left Alive.
But in this movie, he is like buff and looking good.
Yeah. No, Tom Hiddleston looks great, and he's lucky that he does, because his character is literally nothing. He has no lines. He doesn't say anything interesting.
Okay, here's something. This is a criticism I've seen people
lay it on me.
Movie. So the criticism of this movie is it's twofold that I've seen, and I find it to be hipster criticism.
All right.
Because, here's the thing. First of all, people saying that they don't like the humor in the John C. Reilly character. They wish that it had been more serious. Humor is part of life. One of the reasons why his character reads so realistic to me and is as multidimensional as he is because he has a sense of humor. He says funny things because that is how real life is. People make jokes. Like, I've never been around people who are as self-serious as characters are in certain action films and dramas. That's just not realistic to me.
Oh, well, even parts of this.
You're supposed to have somebody to break the kind of break the tension of the movie, and that's what he was for.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and that and between him and John Goodman, you have a fair share of the exposition out of the way. But the other criticism that I see that's funneled into all this is that a lot of the characters are not multidimensional enough. They are just likable enough. These characters are not any less or more multidimensional than the characters in Aliens, the soldier characters in Aliens,
Exactly.
which are also a largely military stereotype.
Yeah.
And they're likable. Like everybody remembers the Bill Paxton lines. Everybody remembers those characters. The characters presented here are
how great she was.
The characters here are very much in that same vein, and they work well enough because this is a monster movie. You're there to see the monsters. The characters are realistic enough. Like the guy that's riding his son. That when he died, I was sad. I wasn't like weeping sad, but I was sad because they made him just enough of a lived-in character to where you cared. The same thing when. I'm forgetting the actor's name, but the actor who sacrifices himself to distract.
Yeah, his story was. And by the way, he has
interesting.
one of the best pieces of humor. I'll let you continue. I just want to. I'm gonna let you finish, but I just wanted to mention he has one of the best pieces of humor.
Let's please let this be the last time you quote Kanye West.
No, but it's really wonderful, and I've seen lines like this where people bitch about it like nobody would say something like that, but I totally believed it. After they face off against a monster, he sits down and he's eating, and the guy goes, "What's the deal?" And he we just saw the typical action movie kind of line. We just saw a giant thing and it did this and it did that, and the guy goes, "You're right, that was a highly unconventional encounter." And I mean, I loved that because it sounded to me like something that like my grandpa and lots of people of that generation would say, which is basically, just because that's a generation that is accustomed to crazy shit happening in human history, and just going, well, that was definitely something I did not expect,
And his relationship with that other soldier made him likable enough to where when he dies, you are sad about it. And I will argue till I am blue in the face this movie has the exact same template as far as that is concerned as Aliens, which is a movie a lot of people consider to be a classic. And I will say Aliens has the exact same amount of three-dimensional characters as this movie does. This movie has a lot of two-dimensional characters, but they're two-dimensional characters that serve the story well, and that's not something that we should always be critical of, depending on the kind of a movie. If this movie was a drama, that you would need fully, fleshed out characters.
When I attack Tom Hiddleston's character, and I'm not saying. So I guess he's adequate. I'm just saying that there's room to do something with him.
I disagree. I think that he's supposed to be the Clint Eastwood cool, quiet character that just kind of, or the Jack Palance, that just kind of is like he's Jack Palance. I mean, he's just he's the tracker. He's just supposed to look cool and be awesome.
I guess that's true. But it's odd, given how beautiful he is. It's so odd that we can't take our eyes off John C. Reilly, and I think it's.
No, listen, John C. Reilly is the MVP of most movies for
True enough.
The last 20 years.
And I have to disagree with you there, Jason.
All right.
When Tom Hiddleston's on the screen, I am not looking at anybody else.
Having said that,
there's also an all-star cast too. I mean. It's an ensemble piece. Like they're really, other than Kong is actually the main character of this. I would say that the human characters are there just to kind of set you up for he's the real action hero. So like these human characters are just things to set up.
You're totally right. That's a totally good point. Yeah. And these characters are being different. Yeah.
If I'm going to be critical of anything as far as that, is I feel like that as far as like people that were able to sell their bullshit, like the bullshit pseudoscience behind a lot of this. I feel like when they killed off John Goodman, they lost their important chess piece there, because he was really good at selling the bullshit in this movie.
So let's talk about the bullshit and the positive and the world building. which are two sides of the same coin, the bullshit and the world building of Monarch. And what is this thing, the MonsterVerse? Because I think these are related. First of all, what the hell is Monarch? And did anybody in the audience understand what was going on with that? Because I'm not sure. It took me some time to remember. Oh, yeah. Those are those guys
From Godzilla.
from Godzilla. Right. That took some
I mean,
time.
they're kind of expecting you to, but they also explain just enough that it doesn't really matter if you've seen
Yeah.
Godzilla. But again, people who complain about there not being enough characters are also like, why wasn't there enough monster in
Yeah.
Godzilla? It's like, which, you know, for a monster movie, you kind of got to pick and choose a little
It's
bit.
a really good point. Think how long it takes to show, like King Kong shows up in literally the first scene in this movie. The first scene that blew me away. The surprises are all other monsters, and in Godzilla we get only hints of Godzilla until what, like an hour into that movie, I guess, something like that. And yeah,
Which
yeah,
again,
you're
you know,
absolutely
like I
right.
had said before, I timed it, and the actual amount of Godzilla in any Godzilla movie, even the ones you think have tons of Godzilla, is less than you think. But I don't know. Everybody just nobody's happy about anything. It seems like. So,
Yeah.
Well, this movie definitely seems like it's better received than the Godzilla movie in some ways. I think the connective tissue was done well. I think
Yeah.
that this was a lot less awkward. It's a lot less awkward than any of the DC movies, and then a good chunk of the Marvel movies. I feel like
That's true.
that they nicely expand on what they're setting up with all the Hollow Earth stuff, which I love because I love that as a particular facet of pseudoscience. But also, like, yeah, Tony's absolutely right. If you have never seen Godzilla, if you had not seen the Godzilla from a couple of years ago, you don't need to have seen that movie to enjoy this. Like, they explain everything. That they're like, Monarch is this organization that works for the government, and they track down weird stuff. They deal with like the Bermuda Triangle, and they're mapping Skull Island, and they're headed by John Goodman's mad scientist character, who has ties to the Godzilla movie because he was on an aircraft carrier that was destroyed by Godzilla, but they never actually named Godzilla by name. It's just if you've seen...
he was the one they were trying to destroy. Like at the
You're
we
right.
see a bunch of stuff, and there's
Yeah.
a boat that was meant to destroy Godzilla. And we see that in Godzilla where he comes out of the water and he goes in. John Goodman was on that boat.
Yeah.
So they make it a point. In fact, Jason, did you stay for the post credits?
I sure did. So then it all comes clear at the in the final, and by the way, all of this is super goofy, but I loved it. I was grinning from ear to ear. I love it, but it's pure silliness. They're saying, welcome to the organization. Here's the, yeah. I was and they hint at all the other monsters that are appearing in this universe. Isn't it strange that this is the world that we live in now? I mean, when just about 10 years ago, it was a universe where, 15. It was a universe where movies that weren't direct sequels of one another never made reference to one another, because the idea that you could have continuity between lots of movies at one time, that whole Marvel universe kind of thing, just didn't exist. And in fact, all the advice that was taken as gold plated in Hollywood said, don't do that stuff. That would be nuts. The audiences would never be able to keep track of it. But that hasn't turned out to be the case at all. We live in a world now of massive continuity, which is sort of remarkable.
But in this particular genre, I mean, Toho was doing this back in the 60s and 70s. Like, they already had a monster universe. They paved the way for this.
Absolutely.
And then even before that, you had the Universal monsters. So I feel like in some ways, monster movies are almost better set up for this stuff. That superhero movies are also a natural fit because it's been done for so many years in comics.
Yeah.
I think this sort of pulpy material lends itself to this stuff, and it's people like you say, oh well, we're gonna do a Godzilla versus Kong movie. People are gonna be like, yeah, okay, I'd go see that. Like, and they're not gonna expect too much out of it other than like maybe an evening's entertainment. I don't know. Although as Tony was just pointing out, people can be really opinionated as well. So I'm probably
True.
being too kind.
No, but this is still so I think you said something that I hadn't thought of, and that's a really good point. That there is some tradition in this country for continuity in monster movies, for sure. Hammer did it, Universal did it. That's true. In big budget pictures, that obviously was less true. I mean, unless there were direct sequels to one another, there was just an assumption that people weren't watching it. I think a couple things have happened. I think with all the streaming and everything, even more so than with having to collect DVDs. You collect DVDs or Blu-rays, you go to the Walmart, you get it, so you might skip one or two. But with streaming now, I think there's an assumption that everybody can watch everything and that people don't need to rely on recall so much so that you can rely on on continuity between films. But I know that this is happening faster than it used to. I mean, look at this. Like War of the Gargantuas, right? That's one of my favorite Japanese monster movies. But in the United States, that was what it was called, War of the Gargantuas, because they did not want to link it in people's minds to the other monster movie that it was attached to. It was actually a sequel to Frankenstein, to the Japanese Frankenstein. And they just didn't want to. The producers figured, look, the likelihood that people saw that movie 3 years ago is not a big enough. We can't gamble on that. So let's pretend. I like this new universe. I think it's really neat. We're even in the world where we're seeing abortive universes. Sony tried its damnedest to get a new Spider-Man universe going, and eventually just had to give up because they tried several times. I mean, the first Spider-Man trilogy was too early for this wave, and then the second one didn't even make it all the way through being a trilogy, and they finally said, we're done. But they really intended to have like 10 movies in the Spider-Verse. That didn't happen.
I think the with this sort of thing, whether it's not, it's going to work. And I think what this film and the Godzilla reboot from a few years ago did well is both of those movies work as standalone movies. Like in their, the first Iron Man is an example of this as well. Like, as Marvel's gone along, they've gotten less good at it, but they don't necessarily have to do it, I guess. But, both of those movies, I liked the Godzilla movie, and I like this movie quite a bit, but, you don't have to see one or the other to enjoy either one of them. And I think that's really important here. This is ultimately, we can talk the whole podcast about the universe stuff, and I think that would be a waste in some ways, because in this movie, in of itself, there's so many cool things. Like, Kong fighting a giant octopus, which is a throwback to Godzilla versus King Kong. I mean, come on. Like, there's soldiers climbing up on Triceratops skulls and firing machine guns at pterodactyls.
You got emplacement on a Triceratops skull, fighting giant lizard beasts.
Oh, yeah. No, this is where the weird war thing.
Spider.
Yeah.
That like stabs people with its giant spider legs because that's the way it would eat. This is all like, oh man, this stuff is so cool.
And if you're a monster fan, that's what you're there for.
Exactly.
You called it Weird War, Tony, which is a whole genre that I don't think has actually made it into the movies very much. But when you think Weird War, what are you thinking? Like what? Well, like if we were to go out today and go grab some trade paperbacks or some big, black and white DC phone books.
Like all the stuff that has like monsters fighting in some, I mean, heck, I wish if I had my way, and maybe we should just pitch this, like there's Creature Commandos, which is a whole troop of Medusa, yes. Dracula, Frankenstein, and also a robot.
Yeah.
Like I want a Creature Commandos movie. And Hollywood, can you let Jason and Drew and I write this movie? Because we would totally be awesome at it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All the Hollywood people who listen to this podcast. Anyway, that kind of stuff is stuff that I just super dig. And, grew up, there's Haunted Tank where, there's a tank with a ghost in it that only the tank pilot can see. all of this kind of stuff.
That's true.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, it does romanticize war in some ways, but it's also made for some really cool stories.
It romanticizes war in the same manner that pop culture has always romanticized war. If you have a problem with that, if you just simply can't watch war be romanticized, then you are going to be locked out of a lot of Hollywood, and that's just the way
True.
it
And I think
is.
But I think it did a good job in this film of showing some of the complexities of that, because you have the crazy ass Samuel L. Jackson who just craves that action and that war. Like, he doesn't know how to live a regular life. He just wants to. I mean, did you see the smile on his face when they're getting shipped out, and then he gets the call of like, "Are you willing to do one more thing before you go back home?" And he just smiles like, "Give it to me." He doesn't even know what it is. He's like, "I'm there, whatever it is." And it's not that he's got this great like honor and duty thing going. It's that he just craves that action. He has to have it. It's an addiction for him. And then the other guys, the ones, his underlings, who are like, "We want to go home. What the hell? We don't want to do this." And then when they're confronted with doing something that's just immoral as far as they're concerned, then they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that," which I think is a really hard. I mean, I'm not in the military, but I can't imagine how hard it must be to have to make a decision between something that you feel is completely unethical and following orders, which is what you're there to do. So I just, I thought that was really an interesting portrayal of that dilemma.
Well, and that actually, yeah, there are moments here that are reminding us all the time of various things we know about Vietnam, and some of it about what we know about Vietnam War movies. But yeah, there were moments when they say we're not going to do this that reminded me very strongly of the My Lai massacre, which happened something like 30 years ago, I guess. Well, when was the My Lai massacre? Anyway, that one was where basically you had American soldiers who were very, very basically keyed up because of terrible casualties, bad days of fighting, and they basically came upon a village that they set to just destroying. They had, all discipline had been lost. It became a free fire zone. They were shooting everybody, men, women, and children. The story was that they were afraid that there were spies, that children were being armed, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then you had a few American soldiers who came upon this craziness and really worked to try to stop the massacre in the middle of it. Doing things like putting their own helicopters down between villagers and soldiers who had essentially gone nuts. And here you have callbacks to stuff like that. When these soldiers, the soldiers are like, "You know what, Mr. Jackson, you have gone around the bend, and I'm not going to follow you anymore. This is not appropriate." My Lai massacre was 1968, by the way. So it's way older than 30 years. But yeah. There's also, I know that, like, did you laugh out loud? Is it obnoxious to laugh out loud when they quote directly from Apocalypse Now, when the big Sikorsky helicopters are like lit up against the sun, and you're like,
oh, that, that, and then it becomes Kong lit up. I mean, I thought that Kong reveal was amazing. And in fact, I told Drew that I wish I hadn't seen that at Button-Thon so I could see it fresh with him, because I think that was so cool. The only things I complained about were, there's a few lines that are just so overwrought. They're just like
yeah, they're wrong.
Where she goes, "I've seen enough mass graves to,"
Sure.
well, it's really obvious this is a mass grave. Like, oh, come on. And a lot more people survived the helicopter crashes. And even she survives. Like,
it's a very good point.
Kong looks like he's going to crush her. Like, there's a bunch of but that's what action movies are. People survive crazy stuff unless they're not supposed to survive the crazy stuff, and then they don't,
The girl in Kong's fist always survives a lot more than you would think that she could. Because, I mean, Naomi Watts, there are many times in the Peter Jackson movie where it seems like Naomi Watts should be terribly injured by the way that Kong is throwing her around and stuff. But hey, that's just part of this genre.
Yeah, no, that's what that's the part. Helicopter crashes are pretty terrible, and maybe there might be some people in the military who are like, no, I mean, the statistics are X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
but just knowing what I've seen and how that all works and how helicopters work, a lot of people survive some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I agree.
when Kong decides. I've even seen people. What I thought was funny is I've seen people complaining that they didn't go higher and like, oh, the helicopters are like, Kong can still jump there, right? Like
Right.
when people are griping about that stuff. Like you saw like he doesn't just stay on the ground. I don't know if they would have been even then if they would have been safe, but
It's God, I'm really sorry you had to be exposed to that, Tony, because that sounds like a maddening bunch of people to listen to. I
it's
mean,
on
seriously.
Facebook. It doesn't really matter. You just feel bad. It's all good. It's fine. It's fine. Like totally.
Well,
I just think it's funny.
also,
People.
let's be fair here.
Yeah.
They were probably all in shock because they just were looking at a giant gorilla.
Right?
Like you would
I thought
think
that was I believed that. That I
No, they're
believed.
obviously in shock because there's so many things that they just do that you're just like, yeah, for sure you would have made a different choice if you had been actually conscious, but you're just like, what? Because you don't even know what you're looking at. It's like what I said about the spider, where I'm just looking at it going, what? What am I looking at right now? They don't even know. They just suddenly run into this big black wall, and they're like, I don't understand what's happening
Well,
right
it's
now.
so big. The
Yeah.
spider is so large that it's very difficult to like get your bearings on like what it is until the camera goes ahead and gives us a kind of a
Yeah.
King Kong's eye view of
You
what
can't
the
see the
spider
spider.
looks like.
You can't see the spider for the trees.
Yeah,
Mhm.
precisely. Yes.
Well, I want to. Can we backtrack to Samuel L. Jackson for a second? Because I want to.
We haven't discussed him. Yeah, we should. We totally should.
I want to say something.
Okay.
I was discussing Samuel L. Jackson with a friend of mine on Facebook,
Mhm.
and he was talking about how Samuel L. Jackson is basically hired to kind of play the Samuel L. Jackson stock character
Okay.
for in movie after movie. And I was saying, well, yeah, I think that's right, but that works for me more often than it doesn't. But he's tired of it at this point, and I have to say, like I other than the direct quote from Jurassic Park where he says, "Hold on to your butt," and I feel like
Yeah.
this was one of the better variations on. Actually, no, I take that back. I actually liked him quoting himself from Jurassic Park, but
Didn't bother me. Didn't bother me. And I thought that yes, he does a lot of repetitive stuff from movie to movie, but I thought this was an interesting one because
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson turns out to be the foil. I mean, he's the problem in this movie, and that is not where you expect this is going. So I like that.
My defense of him is a lot of what like Julia was talking about. Like he develops a lot of this character with his body language. Like he the smile that she talked about, and like the glint he gets into his eyes. And he has a line at one point in this movie where he talks about like, well, this is a war we can win because they didn't allow him to win Vietnam. And I just found that fascinating and deeply sad at the same time.
Well, yeah, he also says we didn't lose the war, we abandoned it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of Vietnam vets that did feel that way. Like they didn't all go, I guess the appropriate term in this movie you would say ape shit.
Yeah.
But like I really enjoyed his character in this. I think this is one. I know that I may catch some crap for saying this, but I think this is one of the best performances I've seen as far as it was a variation on the Samuel L. Jackson stock character, but it was a very, very good one. And I really liked him in this movie. I think he was also also alongside John C. Reilly, he was also a very multi-dimensional character to me.
Yeah, exactly. These two guys who are not really the main characters, but nevertheless they're driving the plot and they're very memorable. John C. Reilly because he's funny and tragic, and Samuel L. Jackson mainly because he's on edge and kind of scary. They're great. And that I'm really impressed that this is a major Hollywood film that is filling out minor roles with memorable people. Now I have a complaint that the major roles, look, It was fine. I loved this movie all the way through, so it was fine. But I'm saying, to me, there's nothing memorable per se about Brie Larson's photographer character or about Tom Hiddleston's SAS character, other than Brie Larson is beautiful and Tom Hiddleston is handsome.
I
But other
liked
than
her
that,
I mean, I liked her
yeah,
bits about the her photographer when she's back to kind of being an embedded photographer and that kind of stuff. There was a lot of good business with that, actually.
there is good business. I totally
Well,
agree with you.
she's certainly more interesting than the damsels in distress in the previous film,
Absolutely.
the previous version.
I don't know if she's more interesting than Naomi Watts, and I say that because Naomi Watts was a an actress, but she was also a petty thief because she was starving and blah blah blah. I wonder, Tony, look, it's okay. Now this is dangerous because we're making this up on the spot, but do you think that maybe what we're coming to is that to have the character be kind of memorable, you have to have at least two things about them that, like, in other words, she should be both a a dedicated photographer trying to prove herself, but also, I don't know, you name it, a juggler. I mean, because
I mean, she has enough. The reason she goes is because she also has that, like, they're like, you could stay behind and not do this. Like, they actually
yeah,
come out, and she's like, no, this is what I do.
yeah, no, that's true.
And I think
That
that,
that is
I
that
mean,
is totally
what
great.
more? Like, I don't know. Do you
I don't know
absolutely
what
have to
more.
have all of that? I don't think so.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
mean,
I don't know
think
the
about the
answer to this
average
question.
person, like, in general. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm stupid because people look at me sometimes and I'm not super successful at it, but I'm in two bands and I have a job and I occasionally write
yeah,
and do this podcast, and people are like, what? But
yeah.
to
Why are
me,
you so
like, I
active?
mean, like, that's not
Why do you contain so
always
many
normal.
multitudes, Tony Salvaggio?
Well, I'm
What?
not even. That's not even bragging. It's just
Yeah.
but I'm not
No,
super
no, I'm with
successful
you. I
monetarily
understand
at any of
completely.
that.
Yeah, no,
And
that's a totally good point. But
you
I
know,
think it
like,
makes you an interesting character. If I were to say, yeah, hey, here's the tech director, and by the way, he runs a podcast and is in a couple bands, and and so at any given time we can cut back to that stuff. That's
but
good stuff.
but what about, for example, the dude in Big Lebowski?
Yes,
He have to? He doesn't do
he
a
doesn't do anything.
lot,
No, you're totally right.
like, in general,
That's
but
his
he's still
point. That's the
interesting.
point of his character, is that he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, if Brie Larson, so I don't know what the answer is here. I'm just saying that somehow she falls flat for me. Uh,
There's just
I
not
didn't think
room in the movie for so many characters to be really well developed. I mean, there's just not room. So the two of them just need to be the hot ones, and that just has to be good enough because we don't
Yeah.
have time when we're dealing with all these other people.
Well,
and
they're more
it's
than just let's in defense of these characters. They're more than just attractive people. They're also the compassionate characters because
Yep.
they are the
True,
ones
yeah,
that make
they're
the
the heroes,
decision. Yeah, they're the ones that make the decision when Sam Jackson's like, "Well, I'm going to go kill Kong." They're like, "You can't kill Kong because Kong's the one that kills the giant lizards that would otherwise eat the natives. So
Yeah.
we're going to
Otherwise it would
go
just be the
stop
crazy.
that."
Otherwise,
you're
it would
right.
just be the crazy World War II guy who'd be like, "No, you can't." Is that he's got his little team now. Yeah.
This movie is so
Exactly.
jam-packed that they even have a nod to the Flight of the Phoenix, where they take three charges to start the engine of the plane that they've built from another plane, and they do it in a montage. I mean, that's how packed to the gills this movie is. That was amazing to me, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that, like, they do
Well,
this.
I
Okay,
also
third
just love
time's the
that they build a
charm.
boat out of old World War II planes.
Yeah,
That was great.
that was truly great. And also that they haven't apparently started it in, like, years, and so um, but like in Flight of the Phoenix, getting that thing started, because in that one they take a wrecked plane and they build a smaller plane. In this case, they take a wrecked plane and other stuff and they build a boat. But they get all the suspense in Flight of the Phoenix out of, can they get it started? And are they going to use up all of their fuel just trying to start the engine, and it's very stressful and yada yada. And here there's a nod to that, and I know these guys are very literate, so I know it's a deliberate nod, but there's so much going on that they're like, okay, we can do the little Flight of the Phoenix thing, and then we're going to come over and do this thing. I love that. I mean, I have to say, and I know I'm talking out of both sides, because the same problem that causes us not to have more character bits from Brie Larson also is what gives us 1,000 different little bits in general.
Well,
So,
also,
yeah,
again, the real hero of the movie is Kong. It's not Brie Larson. It's not Tom Hiddleston.
true.
They like Brie Larson is there to be the Fay Ray
Ostensibly the
character,
heroine.
although
I mean, she is the lead,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think she's more interesting than Naomi Watts. I agree with you on that. But she works for, I don't know, like those characters worked for me. They weren't amazingly memorable, but this movie has enough other memorable characters that I will forgive them for that. Plus, it has giant oxen. It has pterodactyls.
It sure does.
It teases us with giant ants that we never see.
Isn't that funny? Yes, it does. And like Tony mentioned, it teases us with the freaking hollow Earth. Apparently there's a hollow Earth, but the hollow Earth theory, which we've always known to be crackpot, is not actually true per se. It's just slightly wrong. Instead, what you've got are giant pockets of hollow Earth, or what you and I might call caves. Nevertheless, there are giant underground huge areas tunneling around different parts of the Earth, and the monsters live there. That's pretty neat. I mean, that's really cool. What else? Yeah, you got little pterodactyls about the size of turkeys that like pluck that guy off the boat and eat him.
Oh, it's so gruesome, and it's also so just like, whoa, like, there's your Monster Kid moment. That kind
Yes,
of stuff where you're not really supposed to laugh, but it's the absurdity
it's
and
funny.
insanity
No,
of
it's
it.
played for laughs. It is. That one's played for laughs. Yeah, it's not as
Felt bad for
gruesome.
Especially
guy.
since that guy looked like Welcome Back Cotter.
Yes,
No, and
yes,
he just really didn't. He just really was looking forward to getting home.
yes.
He
The
was like, "Oh,
pterodactyl
I'm
ate
sorry,
Gabe
dude."
Kaplan.
I
Is
should
what
be
happened.
working at a desk.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. But that's actually funny. Funnily enough, that is a lift of. I think the gag was done a little more brutally. I don't know if it was funnier or not in Jurassic World. Same gag
Oh
where
yeah.
You know,
where the assistant was picked up by the pterodactyls and torn apart in the sky. That one was worse. I don't know
this
which one's
is a
better.
much better movie than Jurassic World.
Oh
I
yeah.
have to like
Oh yeah.
if we're gonna talk like island filled with prehistoric monsters movies that have come out in the 21st century, like, and I enjoyed Jurassic World more or less, but this
Yeah.
this is 1,000 times better than that.
Yeah. I like it okay, but this pure enjoyment, this has it in spades. I really like this one.
Yeah, I guess so. I really did enjoy Jurassic World, but I think this is ultimately a more memorable movie. Also because it's clearly part of this big cycle. So the other cool thing with these like movies that are in a universe is that if you are kind of unimpressed by the one you get this season, there's another episode coming around the bend. That none of them just stand by themselves. It was interesting to me. Okay, can you guys explain something to me? If King Kong, this Kong, is gonna meet Godzilla, is that gonna be a prequel to the to Godzilla that we just saw 2 years
I think
ago?
they already dug their heels in with some of the lines that John C. Reilly says, is that Kong isn't fully grown. He said that he's still growing, and
Yeah,
I
but
think the thing is they will jump to present day, and we will have a King Kong that is just massive.
as big as that Godzilla that we saw in 2014.
Oh,
Yeah, that
absolutely.
makes sense. Yeah.
Like
I don't
said,
know if I'm going to be rooting for Godzilla. Like, I think I might be rooting for Kong. Kong has got a lot of personality in this.
I think that's always kind of been like, I think if it was always the kind of East meets West, even in the original, they kind of felt that way.
Yeah.
Are you a
When-
Kong?
when I-
Like,
when I
are
was
you
a kid,
dyed
there
in
was
the rule of American? Then you better like Kong.
You remember the story that they used to tell, Tony, where they would say that, oh, well, there were actually two versions, and in one version King Kong wins, but in the other version Godzilla wins, and that did you hear that? And it was totally not true, by the way.
It's totally not true. We found once we had the internet and could do the things you're talking about, where we can watch everything.
Yeah, Yeah, and that did not exist. It's a draw, basically, if I recall, in the old one. My main complaint, and we're gonna do King Kong versus Godzilla because we'd be idiots if we didn't. But my main complaint about King Kong versus Godzilla is that if I recall, this is the way I remember it. I cannot tell you if this is actually accurate. Is that basically it is talk for like 70 minutes, and then it's King Kong versus Godzilla.
There's a lot
That's
of talking. I mean, it's on Blu-ray, super cheap, which I think is awesome. Like,
you know what else I want to see? I want to see that one where we get Mecha King Kong
oh
because
yeah,
I'd be super sad.
Buy on Blu-ray. It's awesome.
King Kong
I
escapes.
you know, it's funny, you know, they keep talking about how this is a reboot of the King Kong franchise, and I don't always think of King Kong like that because by comparison to other, he's absolutely a film icon, you know, that is on the level of. I mean, look, he just kicked Wolverine's ass at the box office this last weekend. So, like,
Sure.
King Kong is pop culture, but I never think of this as a franchise the same way I think of, like, say, Godzilla or James Bond, especially since so many of the movies are just the retelling of Kong climbing the Empire State Building. Whereas,
Yeah.
you know, then you start bringing out, like, the stuff like the Toho Kongs and, like, the weird, you know, Rankin Bass animated series that was adapted from those. And
Yeah.
you know, I start to realize, like, oh yeah, there's a lot more Kong pop culture than I even think about, because really the one that I always go back to is, you know, the one, the original, or you know, King Kong versus Godzilla. Those are kind of my two go-to. This one, you know, I really like the Peter Jackson one, but this one, because it's shorter and more to the point, I think is going to be one I will probably, once it comes out on Blu-ray, it'll probably be one that I revisit a lot, because, like, you know, this is like the sort of movie, like, if you're like, man, I just want to watch a monster movie, you know, like, I just want a movie with a lot of monsters, and, you know, just gonna really get my inner 10-year-old charged up on a sugar high. Like, this is the sort of movie I would want to throw on. Like, it really just delivers that.
I'll back to back this with Pacific Rim, and that'll be great.
Well, there's.
Oh man,
we
I like
haven't even
I like
talked
this
about.
so much more than Pacific Rim.
That's fair. I mean, I like Pacific Rim a ton. What I'm saying is, as a double
They go
feature,
well, yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think just as my final thought, because I don't think we need a formal final thought on this one. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the fact that there are a lot of monster battles in this movie, and it's always exciting. I mean, we have reached a point where a giant gorilla fighting a giant skull-headed lizard creature is is beautiful and amazing and fast and exciting, and it just blows my mind. You know, I
That fight
you know,
was unbelievable. It was so crazy.
Yeah.
Just I don't even know how to describe it. You just have to see it. This is definitely a film you have to see on the big screen if you can at all.
Yeah.
I think if anything, no offense to the Draft House, but I could have used this movie louder. I wanted it to be more stomping, and like, this is a spectacle movie full of smashing things. I wanted even more spectacle. Like, I wanted more sound and just bombast to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah, Tony, what are your final thoughts?
Oh, I enjoyed it, and, you know, I don't know, man. People are gonna gripe about everything. I like the take on it. Again, you know, I'm slightly biased because I actually got to talk to the dude who was making it. And how often does that happen?
Oh yeah,
I guess more often in Austin, but in general, like, and I thought, you know, he had a lot of great points and was really cool about stuff. So in that respect, like, I was on the fence, like, you know, I guess I'll get around to it. And after seeing what I saw and talking to him, I was like, oh man, I have to go opening weekend. It was great that we decided to cover this, because you know, I was going to go regardless. So I think that's super
excellent.
cool. But I love this movie. I'll get it on Blu-ray. It was hella fun. The creatures are crazy. You know, John C. Reilly's awesome. I think everybody just does everything they're supposed to do in an action movie, and they do it well.
Very cool.
huge, like, oh, what did this character grow? Like, no, because they fought monsters for 24 hours, 48 hours, I guess, right? Like, that's how long
Yeah.
they have to get to the thing. Like, no, they didn't grow at all because they were trying to, like, they didn't have time to contemplate the world.
You're right. They're
They were
trying to
fighting all
survive a
night.
giant monkey. Yeah, no, you're right. The only one who has a real arc is Samuel L. Jackson, and because he
Well, I
goes
put
from.
John C. Riley does as well because
Oh, he has for sure. Oh yeah, I mean, and his story brought tears to my eyes. And I mean, literally, I teared up at this stupid monster movie. I teared up at that. I did.
That's not bad. I know a lot of people who teared up over Logan. So
Yeah.
hey, whatever affects you, that's cinema. That's actually kind of
Logan?
why we talk about things, right?
Yeah.
'Cause
Logan,
Yeah, you're
I
right.
totally cried at Logan. I didn't just tear up. I was like blubbering all over the place.
Yeah. Okay, Julia, did you have any final thoughts?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that we didn't cover that I thought was important to cover. No, I mean, I already said it's just visually amazing. Cast is fun. The script has its moments and it's not so moments. I can't recommend enough that people see it before it's in the theater and not wait until it comes out on whatever.
Yeah, that's
fun
for
film.
sure. That is really for sure. Drew, because I didn't even tell you were making your final thoughts. So, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, this is definitely one. I'm just going to echo. This is definitely one to see in the theater. This is a monster movie for fans of monster movies. And I am definitely one of those. So I think each and every one of our listeners, if you like this podcast, you will most likely like this movie.
Excellent. Okay, let's do some endorsements. Let's see what people have to recommend in this week that we all watched King Kong beat a giant lizard all to hell. So, Tony, what do you got for us this week? Anything?
Oh man, I'm trying to.
I can come back to you if you like.
Mostly I watched movies, and when I wasn't doing that, I was practicing and doing other stuff. Other than watching kung fu movies, which is I've plugged that a million times. The other thing I have done, band wise. One of the bands that just I saw them recently, keep coming back to them. If you get a chance, listen to the band Freedom Hawk. They're on Amazon. They're on Spotify. I use Amazon Prime streaming. But yeah, listen to Freedom Hawk because they are awesome. That's my endorsement.
Fabulous. Julia, did you have any endorsements?
I can't think of anything. Do you remember anything that I'm going on about?
I know that you'll end up endorsing the same thing I do, or you'll end up endorsing my endorsement when I give it.
What is it?
Well, I mean the Alamo. I mean, see this if you have an Alamo Drafthouse available, that is where you should see this movie. And the reason why is that before the movie, they play all kinds of awesome King Kong stuff. I mean,
and we saw it at the Mueller. If you're in Austin, we saw it at the new Mueller Theater, which is built in a nice central location. So that was super cool. I really like that, and they're building that as their. It's going to be like their family destination. So the bar that's there, it's family friendly. Called Barrel of Fun.
Where the old airport, was?
In that area. Yeah. It's not directly at the old airport. But yeah, and that area is growing, lots of apartments. It's kind of gentrified, but the theater itself is great. The servers are great. The way they're building it is cool. It's got a parking garage. They validate parking the whole 9 yards. It's super cool. I like that place. And it's nice to have like a central one.
Yeah.
That's, in between Slaughter, closer to 35 than Village, etc. So yeah, I think that's really cool.
That is really great. Okay. And Drew, what about you?
Well, I am actually endorsing a movie that I saw on Netflix because I asked the people on my Facebook feed a while back what is a good horror movie to watch that's on Netflix right now. And Mike Dempsey, who is in a horror punk band called the Rebel Flesh here in Austin, he suggested, but you should check them out if you haven't because they're really awesome. But he recommended a Mexican film called The Similars to me.
Oh, I have heard of that.
It's done in the style of a 60s B movie. So, if you don't enjoy that kind of deliberately retrograde look that might grate on you, but for my money, this was one of the most wonderfully strange
What was it called again?
movies, The Similars, and it is the closest thing you can get to a classic episode of The Twilight Zone that I have seen in years. And it is weird in the best way possible. And I don't want to say too much else about it because I feel like that if I try to describe the plot, it will sound goofy. And when you see the movie, it's not goofy, it's strange. So, and actually kind of unnerving. And I recommend it a lot. It's only an hour and a half long, so it just breezes by. Honestly, the movie could be done as a stage play because it all takes place in a bus stop.
No kidding.
So, yeah. It's done very simply and very effectively, and I really liked this movie. So I'm suggesting that those of you who have not already seen it, check it out.
I'm in mine, actually. Also on demand, and I don't think it's made it to many free places yet, but you can even catch it in theaters some places. The Void, which I reviewed for horrormovies.net and saw at Fantastic Fest, and I know some of the people who made it. Some fantastic practical effects in The Void. A lot of people compare it to Carpenter. It's a lower budget film. There's some stuff that worked a little better for me. Your mileage may vary, but The Void, also really good, made by a great group of people. And if you like a lot of the stuff we recommend, I think you'll dig The Void. If nothing else, watch it for the crazy gore, because it's pretty amazing what they did, and it's got a really creepy feel.
Has anybody seen The Love Witch, which I saw advertised at the Alamo, but I haven't seen it yet?
Many of my friends have
I've seen the
it and said
trailer.
it was really awesome.
It looks so great. Maybe it's not going to be good. It looks like Season of the Witch, which is that sort of little scene. Not Corman. It was.
It's a Romero, isn't it?
Yeah, it was Romero. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was George Romero. So Season of the Witch was George Romero's like second picture, and it looks like an Italian movie. I mean, I'm thinking, this is. I have to see this, but I haven't been able to. When
I first saw the trailer, I think I might have even posted it on your Facebook group or your Facebook page.
Yeah, you might be the one who brought it to my attention. You were the first person I thought of. I was like, this is a movie made for Jason. Yeah.
We should do that.
Yeah, we sure should, man. We absolutely should. So, okay. Well, that's wonderful. All right. I think that about wraps it up, but we are just now getting started with our King Kong retrospective. If you're just joining the show, I think it's time to grab all your friends and bring them along. We're getting really close, actually, to having 1,000 people on our Facebook page, and I think we should make it our goal to reach 1,000 by the end of the King Kong retrospective. So all y'all listening, get one more person to come and like our Facebook page, and I think we will swamp that number. I'm so thankful that you guys were on to talk about the new Kong movie, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much for listening. Come to the Facebook page and engage with us, and we will totally talk to you. Have a fantastic week, everyone. It's been a blast.
Later.
Good night.
Bye. Night.